everyone, my name is Bartholomew. This is Big Zaddy 3000, Kanisha, and Donald Duck. You are on the historical side of podcasts, where we talk about the historical events and how they affected individuals' lives on a smaller scale. Today we will be talking about Eastern Germany.
To start, what is so devastating that happened in Eastern Germany that we feel the need to discuss it?
After World War II, Germany was divided into 4 occupied zones. Great Britain took the northwest, France had the southwest, the United States in the south, and finally the Soviet Union in the east. Berlin, the capital of Germany, which was located in Soviet territory, was also divided into occupied zones.
Now let's focus our attention on the east.
GDR, what is it, you might be asking? It stands for the German Democratic Republic Party. It was a state that existed from 1949 to 1990.
After the war, the USSR surrounded Berlin, but did not include the western part of the city in the jurisdictions of the German Democratic Republic.
In 1949, Soviet occupation began to move their authorities, rules, policies, and administrative responsibilities to German communist leaders. And finally, in 1949, the GDR began to function as a state.
People didn't really want to live in the GDR territory because of the economic policies they had. The economy was of course internally planned and state-owned like the rest of the USSR. The housing market was steep and there was a big issue with transporting goods into the state. As you might hear in the interview, malnutrition was a common issue. Prices of housing, basic goods and services were set by the central government.
And so immigration became a huge problem for the GDR. Over the next 12 years, Germany saw between 2.5 to 3 million of its citizens head towards West Germany in search of the better opportunities. These were the British, French, and American territories. By the 1960s, around 1,000 citizens of East Germany were leaving every single day.
So the government came up with a brilliant solution. They decided to build a wall across Berlin to divide the East and West territories. By 1961, the Berlin Wall was established.
The interview you will hear next is with Klaus. He lived and experiences the tragedy of East Germany as a young boy. And we're really thankful to have him on this podcast as he's the nicest man ever and he has had such amazing experiences around the world. Okay, so from all you can remember, how was life different during your time spent there?
What time frame are you asking for?
During the time you lived in East Germany.
I'm born, as you know, in February 49. It was just the year when the German Democratic Republic was founded, or they called the German Democratic Republic, and of course all was under Russian control. We had to drink some goat milk, and then it was thickened with flour, just to make us, just to give a feeling of to have eaten something. But the nutrition, of course, was the biggest problem then. And I know from my parents that still at this 49, they were jumping on trains who were carrying coal.
Yeah.
And to throw coal from the train so that we could have a heating in the winter. So it was really tough times. And what is very interesting, what my mother told me is, I had to be born first, and only then she could apply to receive a milk bottle for me. Fortunately, my father had a friend in the West. He got acquainted to him as a prisoner of war when they were in an American camp. And this friend was living in West Germany. And by 49, the border was still not so close. I mean, the soldiers were shooting, but still in the night they could manage to cross the border. So my father always went to see his friend, and this was just 100 kilometers away. So they could do it somehow by foot through the forest. And my father just smuggled from the west to the east important food. And in reply, he took some clothes because my hometown where I'm born was very famous for making clothes. So also my mother, by profession, she was cutting, she made clothes, yeah. And of course she was working all day because in these days the even still in the first or 2 or 3 years, a grandmother who took care of me during daytime. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, and I only know. I mean, I had a malnutrition. I had a so-called rachitis. Rachitis, we call it also English disease. It's a deficiency of calcium, and I had to drink the liver oil from the whales, just as a replacement for this vitamin B, because it's not available in East Germany. Anyway, this time was very tough, especially specifically because of nutrition, and that's all what I remember. So fortunately, my father always went to this friend in the West, and they decided that we have, for economical reasons, he was fed up with East Germany, and he was almost put into prison in 1953, in the 17th of June, when there was this revolution on the streets, so. Wait, I went to school in 55, and we were trained in a communistic way. I was a convinced young pioneer dedicated to the communism.
Oh.
I remember even I was saying once to my teacher, all these guys in the West, they should be ants. My parents, of course, already were orientating themselves to the West and wanted to go to the West. So, I mean, and just in brief, my father was fed up because after 1953 he was really fed up. He was, by the way, a blacksmith when he was working as a blacksmith before and during the Second World War. He was working as a veterinarian, treating horses. And when we went into the West, my father went officially to his friend, also very close to the former border on the western side. My mother, so said we do not put attraction to us, used as a train to go to East Berlin, and in these days it was always possible without any permit to go to West Berlin. And then she flew by a plane, Pan American or whatsoever. They flew with allies. They only were allowed to fly into West Berlin. So from West Berlin she flew to Hanover. And I was taken by my grandmother. She got a permit to take me with her to see other people, which were not really existing. But so only my father and my grandmother with me got permits to go for a holiday or for a vacation or for a friend's visit to the East, which was still possible at that time, as my mother just makes a deviation through Berlin. There was one interesting thing. If my father would have signed a document that he was threatened of life, we would have been considered refugees. And when we were considered refugees, you got a special passport, a special ID card. And as a refugee, I could have studied for free. We would have received a lump sum to start life. But my father said, no, I'm not a refugee. I was never threatened. I only come here for economical reasons. So he was, say, a migrant, an economical migrant, because he didn't want to start with a lie. He just wanted to say the truth because he was hoping that after some years he would get a permission to return and see his parents and his relatives. And of course in 1957 nobody knew that 4 years after the wall was built and created. So when we left in 1957 to the west, after 2 years, I returned as a young guy, 57 we moved, 59 I was the first, so I was 10 years old. My parents just put me in a train, and I was driving by train. I was crossing the border with permit, with an official permit, and then I was picked up by my grandparents. And from this time, once a year, always, I spent 4 weeks with my relatives in East Germany.
Oh, so you traveled back? So you traveled
I
back?
went always back, just for vacation. Yeah, all summer vacation. We have 6 weeks summer vacation, and every summer vacation I was in the east with my grandparents, with my cousins, etc. So I know all the development, how it developed in the East Germany for the next 30 years. It was even so that I returned in 61 from East Germany to West Germany and did not realize and was not aware that 1 week after the wall was built. So I might have run a little bit into trouble, and they would not have kept me there, but it would not be easy just to move. Anyway, I did that. So what was important, that I was regularly visiting my family in East Germany. And I know very much, say, how East Germany developed in this time. It was a catastrophe. It was, and of course, it was very unexpected, this building of the wall. And yeah.
Like, how did you feel when years later, when the wall finally fell? Like, was that a feeling?
I was crying. I was crying. I was just crying. And I tell you, I mean, okay, I have made, by the way, I have made a film on my life, because I want to show this film my grandchild, my daughters, because nobody knows anymore how the life was in these days. And nobody can imagine how life was, and therefore I said, I have to make a film, a documentary film of my life, instead of writing a book or so, just to show these pictures and films to my, as I said, to my grandson, and might be even more in the future to come. Well, I only, for example, I don't know if you remember, when I married Betty. When I married Betty, we married in 77. We were living in this day. I was living in Africa at that time. I met Betty here during home leave, and then she came to visit me in Africa instead of returning to Brazil. Then she came down to Africa, and we married in 77. And when we had the big party here, we had only friends from here, because my relatives from the east were not allowed to come. Only those who were pensioners already. This was my grandmother and my aunt and another friend, a lady. They were all pensioners. Only they were allowed to attend our wedding. And just by the way, and 1 week after, we went to Campinas and we had our second wedding ceremony down there. But you see, it was so difficult, this life between the two. I felt unhappy when I realized I could work in Africa, I could spend vacation in Sri Lanka, in Ceylon. I drove a Mercedes, I could study whatever I wanted, and then I saw my cousins, how they had to behave in East Germany, how restricted everything was, and of course they were jealous, but they never what we could do, but they arranged themselves in this life. They had to arrange, otherwise you drive crazy, or you try to escape somehow, and on the escape you might be shot. So they didn't want. By the way, in 68, I experienced with one of my cousins the invasion of the Russians in Prague. We were just the day before we went to Czechoslovakia. We went into Prague, and then the first night, we were woken up and said, come up, wake up, the Russians are here, it's war.
Oh.
So, yeah, so it was really horrible. And then after 3 days, I managed with an American convoy to go home to West Germany. I had to leave my cousin in Prague, and several days later he could manage somehow to go back to East Germany. So it was somehow very sad. We were always a separated family. I enjoyed, and the only guy, I have another cousin, and he also escaped before the creation of the wall from East to West Germany. He was an architect. And we moved in 57, and in 58 he was working in Dresden. By the way, in Dresden, this is a very far in the east, Mr. Putin was head of the secret the secret service of the Russians there. He was located in Dresden. So in this Dresden, they got an order by the East German secret service to construct an extension of a prison. And this extension of a prison, they were asked to create cells of 1.65 meters square and high. So small boxes just to put people in for torture. And this is what in 58 these people were asked for. And when his friend, they were working in an office together as architects, as young architects, and when he got to know that things like this happened even in East Germany, he said, okay, so also I flee. And he flew with 50 cents. He ran, and at this time, you just had to ask for a permit. You could go for 2 or 3 weeks to West Germany, and 100,000 did that, and therefore it was the creation of the wall, because they just didn't want that all the people are leaving the country. So, but when you were asking me what happened when the wall fell, I mean, of course, I realized also with my relations, I was never in the East participating in one of these walks in the streets or this. I was very impressed that these people were so brave and dared to go on the streets, and it's like what happened until a few days back in Russia. But these people are threatened on life nowadays. It was like this when it was in 89. And I remember the first time I was attending a birthday party of a professor in Munich. And in this evening, when he had this birthday party, our foreign minister, Genscher, was standing on the balcony of the German embassy in Prague. And he wanted to declare that all these refugees sitting in the territory of the German embassy in Prague, that they were allowed to go by train to the west. And I heard this only in the morning when I was driving home on the Autobahn. I had to stop. I could not continue to drive because I was just crying. And of course, I'm very, very grateful, happy that my parents made the decision to go from east to west. If they would have not made the decision, I was still I was too young to make my own decision. So I was depending on them. And it's unlike 2 other cousins who remained there, we see regularly their parents did not dare, and okay, they of course. They had 30 years of this communistic system, and we think different. Even nowadays, we think different. So I quote the former boss, the head of the British Museum in London, Neil MacGregor, and he said once in his book, and he was he was for a lot of years in Germany. He knows Germany very well. Everybody can be happy. He wrote in his book, as a British, everybody can be happy who never in his life had to live under circumstances like under the Nazis or under the communist system in East Germany. Okay. was the end.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed our dive into this topic, which had a huge historical impact on today's society. We would also like to thank Klaus for joining and sharing his experience with us. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.